The final light blinked green on the vote board, and I was the only one who had not pressed it. Every other seat in the chamber glowed with agreement. 11 empires, 11 votes, 11 signatures on a single order. Destroy the human world. My seat stayed dark, and every eye in that vast circular hall turned to me. The Speaker of the Council, a tall being named Vos Kellen from the Trade Union of Arn, leaned forward with his 4 eyes narrowing. "Delegate Marin," he said, "the vote must be unanimous. Press your mark." I did not move. "You are the only one," he said again, softer this time, almost confused. "Everyone else understands the danger. Why do you hesitate?" I stood up slowly. My legs felt heavy under the weight of every stare in that room. "Because I have seen them," I said, "and none of you have." Laughter came from the eastern benches. Someone called me sentimental. Someone else called me a coward. I let the words pass over me like wind, because I already knew what none of them did. 3 cycles earlier, I had been sent to observe a small human outpost on the edge of neutral space. It was meant to be a short mission, a routine report on their technology and their temperament, nothing more. I was not supposed to speak with them directly. I was supposed to watch from a distance and write my findings for the Council archive. But my shuttle failed during a storm, and I was forced to land near their base. I expected fear. I expected weapons pointed at my chest the moment I stepped out. Instead, a woman named Ellie Marsh walked out into the storm without armor, without a blade, and without hesitation, and she pulled me out of the wreckage before it caught fire. She did not know what I was. She did not know if I was friend or enemy. She only knew that something was trapped and burning, and she went in anyway. That single moment broke every theory my people had built about this species. Our models said humans were young, disorganized, and driven by fear. Our scholars said fear would make them predictable, and predictable things are easy to defeat. But Ellie Marsh did not act like a frightened animal. She acted like someone who had already decided what kind of person she wanted to be, long before the storm ever came. I stayed at that outpost for 11 days while my ship was repaired. In that time, I watched them work, argue, laugh, and grieve. I watched a young man named Tobias Hale fix a broken generator with parts that were never designed to fit together, simply because giving up was not a decision he was willing to make. I watched an old woman named Grace Whitfield lead a group of frightened children through a supply tunnel during a false alarm, calm as still water, humming a tune to keep them from crying. None of them knew the council was already discussing their extinction. When I returned home, I wrote my report exactly as I saw it. I said that humans do not fight to win efficiently. They fight to avoid losing everything, and that is a completely different kind of enemy. I said their strength was not in their weapons, but in their refusal to accept the ending other species would have accepted long before. My report was filed, read, and quietly ignored. The council had already made its decision in private meetings I was not invited to. The vote in the chamber that day was only a formality, a signature to make the decision official. Every empire had its own reason for fear. The Drenvi feared how quickly humans copied and improved captured technology. The Iskar Compact feared how fast their population grew, despite every hardship placed in front of them. The old Choru kingdoms feared something simpler and older, a memory from their own history of a species that had once refused to kneel to them and paid for it in blood, only to rise again stronger. They called it caution. I called it fear wearing a formal robe. "Explain yourself, Delegate Marin," Speaker Kellen said again, and this time the whole chamber went silent to listen. I told them about Ellie Marsh and the storm. I told them about Tobias Hale and the generator. I told them about Grace Whitfield humming softly in a dark tunnel while the ground shook above her. I told them these were not soldiers. These were not warriors bred for combat. These were ordinary people, living ordinary lives, and even they refused to break. "If this is what your ordinary people are like," I said, What do you imagine happens when you threaten the ones they love? Silence held the room for a moment, and then it broke into more laughter, sharper this time. Someone from the Choru delegation said sentiment was not strategy. Someone from the Drenvi said kindness was a weakness that would be corrected the moment their fleets arrived. I sat back down without pressing the vote button, and the council moved on without me. My empire was small, and our fleet was smaller still. My refusal changed nothing about their plans. It only meant my people would not take part in what came next, and would not share in whatever they believed they would gain from it. 8 days later, the combined fleet launched. It was the largest force ever assembled in that quadrant of space. Warships from 11 empires moving together under a single banner, more vessels than most systems had ever seen gathered in one place. I watched the launch reports scroll past my terminal, ship counts and formation patterns, numbers so large they stopped feeling real. The first reports were confident. Human orbital defenses fell faster than expected. Their border colonies evacuated in chaos, and the invading fleet moved forward with the satisfaction of soldiers who believed the hardest part was already finished. Then the reports began to change. A supply convoy vanished near a debris field that human charts had never marked as dangerous, only for the invading engineers to discover, too late, that the debris had been rigged as a trap using nothing but salvaged wreckage and human stubbornness. A communication blackout swept across 3 fleet divisions at once, not from a weapon, but from a program written by human engineers who had studied captured alien hardware for less than a week and found a flaw no one else had thought to look for. Ground forces that landed expecting quick surrender instead found towns that emptied overnight, leaving behind nothing but silence and traps built from farm equipment, fuel drums, and simple ingenuity that no strategist in the council chamber had ever accounted for. I remember reading one report from a Drenvi commander, his voice shaking even through the translated text. He wrote that the humans did not stop when the numbers said they should. He wrote that a defense line that should have collapsed within hours, held for 3 days, resupplied by civilians who carried ammunition through open fields under fire, because retreat was never considered an option worth discussing. He wrote one line I have never forgotten. He wrote, "They do not fight like an army. They fight like a family defending its home, and there is no strategy in our archives built to counter that." Within 2 weeks, the confident reports stopped arriving altogether. What came instead were requests for reinforcement, then requests for withdrawal, then finally, silence from entire fleet sections that had once reported hourly. The Choru Kingdom lost contact with a full third of its ships. The Iskar Compact recalled what remained of its forces, rather than risk losing everything they had sent. The Grand Alliance that had gathered with such certainty in that chamber began to unravel one broken transmission at a time. I did not celebrate when the news reached my desk. There was no joy in being right about something so heavy. 3 months after the retreat began, I received a message through a private channel, one that should not have reached me at all. It was short, written in careful, formal language, and it came from a human diplomat named Owen Bellwether, someone I had never met and never spoken to before that day. The message said that humanity knew every empire that had signed the order against them. It said they knew the names, the fleets, the commanders who had approved the attack. And it said that my empire's name was the only one missing from that list. They did not offer alliance. They did not offer gratitude wrapped in soft words. They offered something simpler and, I think, more honest. They offered to remember. I stood in the council chamber again months later, called to speak about what my empire had learned from the failed campaign. The same delegates who had laughed at me now sat quietly, waiting for answers I did not fully have. Speaker Kellen asked me plainly, "What makes them different, Delegate Marin? What did you understand that the rest of us did not?" I thought of Ellie Marsh pulling me from burning wreckage without knowing what I was. I thought of Tobias Hale refusing to let a broken machine stay broken. I thought of Grace Whitfield humming softly in the dark to keep children calm, while the world shook around her. "They are not dangerous because they are strong," I said. "They are dangerous because they refuse to stop. And refusal cannot be measured on any chart your strategists have ever built." No one laughed this time. I do not know what the Council will decide next, whether they will try again with more caution, or whether the failure of that great alliance will be enough to keep them still for a generation. I only know that when every empire signed their name to that order, I did not, and I have never once regretted holding my hand back from that light. Some choices are not about strategy at all. Some choices are simply about which side of history you are willing to stand on when the vote comes due. I chose mine, and I would choose it again.